Let's bring John in for football at 4 on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. And, John, obviously, there's a lot of people today that are very concerned about the backup quarterback position, but there is some news on Nate Sudfeld and a timeline, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, it's 6 to 8 weeks, and we kind of knew that yesterday from Doug confirmed broken wrist, non-throwing hand, though, so obviously that plays into it. It would have been a significant injury if it were to his throwing hand, but so you look at the calendar and you start talking about it, and you're probably talking worst-case scenario, 4 weeks, probably less than that, could be as few as 2. So you just kind of cobble it together with Cody Kessler, as my guess is going to be the backup for at least a couple weeks. And then Nate should be back. And obviously the plan is not to have to play any of them. So hopefully none of that matters.
Yeah, well, I guess that begs the next question of, number one, with the injury to Sudfeld, do they have any rethinking or intention to play Carson Wentz now?
We'll see. I mean, I can't imagine they would sit him out the entire preseason. I think he'll get a few snaps, certainly when Baltimore's here for week 3. But even then, the Ravens are in for joint practices before the game that week. And Doug has already said that might limit the starters as a whole, their reps, because they're going to get a ton in practice before the game. And that, as I constantly tell people, is more than coaches in the modern NFL, because you can script things that you want to work on. Plus, you're not getting these valuable players injured in a more controlled environment. At least it's less likely. So that plays into the mix as well. Ultimately, I think he'll get a few snaps. It might be this week and next week, week 2 and 3. But it's going to be real quick. And part of it is just common sense. You can't worry about injuries in this league. You just can't. And I know fans get upset and they wring their hands and they say, oh, we need this, we need that. You know, I'll remind you, people were not very high on Nate Sudfeld, and then after 29 minutes of preseason football, all of a sudden he's the concrete answer as a backup quarterback. To be honest, if Nate has to play at some point this season, the Eagles are not going to be in a good situation. So they've had a luxury with Nick Foles for a couple years. They no longer have that luxury. So basically they're like 90% of the other NFL teams in this league. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is.
So I saw you tweet out a list of quarterbacks. Would you anticipate the Eagles bringing anybody in, or do they need at least like a camp arm to get them through some quarters here?
It's a heck of a list.
No. Well, you see that list. No. I mean, from Howie Roseman's standpoint, he's always looking to improve. If he could pull something off to get a young quarterback in here that maybe they think has the ability to develop into something down the road, I think he would visit that. I think he would seriously consider that. If you're talking about bringing in veteran guys like Josh McCown, talking him out of retirement, talking Mark Sanchez out of retirement, calling Sam Bradford, you knew a certain group was going to bring up Colin Kaepernick, who hasn't played an NFL game in I think 900 plus days. No. To every single one of those options. That is not something they would look at. Maybe you revisit that type of thing if it becomes a more serious injury with Nate Sudfeld and he was going to be out for the season. Yeah, then you visit things like that. Now you're talking about the backup quarterback being out, worst case scenario, 4 weeks. Worst case scenario, a month. And, again, it's the backup. He's not supposed to play anyway. So you can get Cody Kessler up to speed. He started 12 games in this league. You hope you don't have to play him. If you do have to play him, you struggle through it, and you move. And that's just how it works. But I think people overreact to preseason football. I mean, both good and bad. understand the players Cody Kessler was playing with. In a situation where it would be forced into action, he'd be playing with Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks and Jason Peters on the offensive line and Zach Ertz and all the receivers. It's different. It's a lot different. So, you know, when you're talking about a third guy, and that's what Cody is, if he's got to move up to the second spot for a couple weeks, you could do a lot worse.
John, what was your biggest positive and negative takeaway from the game last night, if any?
Well, the biggest negative is Nate Sudfeld getting hurt. I'm not saying it's a good thing.
Sure. Well, besides that, like play.
I would say everything is contextual. I say there's no running game again, but I just ran down the list. The entire starting offensive line didn't play. So I don't know how upset you can get about it. You would like to see them run the football a little bit better because they were really bad at it last season. They added Jordan Howard. They added Miles Sanders. They both played, but they didn't run the football effectively. So I was concerned about that. And then perhaps you saw some of the outlandish depth, how should I call it, salutations, whatever. Guys like Matt Pryor, Josh Hawkins, Jeremy McKinnon, where you see some people say, wow, these guys are good. Well, not so fast on that.
Not so fast, my friend. Yeah. What do you think is one question that Coach Doug Peterson is looking to hopefully have answered throughout these preseason games?
Throughout the preseason games, again, I don't think it is that with coaches now. And Doug has talked about this, and I wrote about it on 973ESPN.com. Practice is more important for them. So it's kind of the stuff you don't see versus the stuff you do see. And obviously, because you don't see it from a fan base perspective, they're going to play up what they do see. And I was trying to explain to people, you know, when we do our beat reporter pool and we pick the final 53 and all of us get 52 or 51, it's not because we're geniuses. It's because we're at practice every day and we see what the coach is like. The coaches put far more emphasis on practice than these games. And you saw, by the way, Doug sat basically every meaningful contributor on this team with the exception of some young players, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders because he's a rookie, Jordan Howard because it's his first time here. Nobody played. So doesn't that tell you what kind of emphasis they put on these games?
I
yes,
think a logical person would say that, yes, but we literally just got done talking to somebody who thinks that there is a lot of value and that these games are still important.
Well, there isn't, and they're not.
Perfect.
I mean, the whole league is going this way. It's not just the Eagles. You see it all over. I mean, people are excited for Carson Wentz versus Nick Foles this week. They might not play, either of them. It wouldn't shock me at all. So there'll be that hype all week. And I think maybe each will get a series or two. But if they don't, it wouldn't shock me. Nobody's trying to win these games. Nobody's trying. And I also said it's kind of an ugly setup from the league's perspective. And it's the reason why even Roger Goodell himself has admitted we got to cut this down to 2 games. They could cut it to 0 and it wouldn't have any impact. I also pointed to college football. There's sort of inertia. College football doesn't play preseason games. They show up week 1, they play. They have no issues. So I think people don't think. They think because it's always been this way, it always has to be this way. And I don't necessarily agree with it. I think the league understands now there's a business perspective. They charge regular season prices for these games. They make a lot of money on these games. Even though those seats are empty, those seats are sold, And remember, they don't have to start paying the players till week 1. So this is all gravy from the owner's perspective. So that's part of it. And then the other and the most ugly part of it, so many of these guys have no chance to make the week 1 roster, to be an NFL player. They're chasing their dream. They get to put on the Eagles uniform. That's great. But they're essentially crash test dummies so the important players don't get hurt.
Yeah, it's really scary when you word it like that, John. And Mike and I were talking about this in the first hour of the show, and you said a lot of the same points that either myself or Mike made. And Mike was bringing up the point that, well, these home teams, isolated to the organization itself, they capitalize on revenue opportunities with the home preseason games, such as local broadcasts, like you said, charging the same amount for preseason as regular season. So what do you think, in your mind, is the best answer to move away from the format but still keep everyone happy?
Well, I think the format the NFL wants is 18 regular season games and cut the preseason back to 2. I think if you ask the coaches, they would like to eliminate preseason games in total, most of them, and would like to have more joint practices like we'll see later in this month when the Ravens come here. So you can get the same preparation done, arguably, and from a coach's standpoint, it's more preparation because, again, in a practice environment, you can script what you want to work on. So let's say Doug wanted to work on 4th and 1, 4th and short. Say he wanted to work on goal line work. Well, in a game, you have to hope that comes up. In a practice, in the session, you can script it, and that's Jeff McClain and Jimmy Kempsky screaming as they walk by me. But if you can script the session and you can get things done more than in a game situation. And Doug has talked about this a number of times. And for whatever reason, like that other fan who said it's important, he's obviously not listening.
Well, right. The other fan happened to be Billy Schwein from the locker room, his Get Off My Lawn segment, in which he says, he's talked to guys like Vince Papale.
Well, they're old school guys.
Right, what he said, but it was
Johnny Unitas, I think he spoke to.
It was important to those guys in that era, but anymore, it's just not, right? I mean, it's just like...
Oh, it was hugely important. And Jim Swartz, and I wrote about this, and everybody should read it at 973ESPN.com. He went off on a story, as he's often prone to do, about his growing up in Baltimore as a big Colts fan. And he was talking about when the NFL preseason was 6 games long. 6 games. And back in 1978, Burt Jones, for people who remember him, was a great, great quarterback, was an all-pro, coming off that type of season. The Colts put him back in the game in the 6th preseason game, took him out and put him back in to win the game. And he separated his shoulder. And he was done for the season. And one of the projected best teams in the league turned into one of the worst teams in the league without one of the best quarterbacks. And that's how things have shifted drastically. Now, part of it was in that era, you had 2-a-days. You had the time to practice and prepare. So it was very important for coaches to prepare, and they had the opportunity to do that. In the modern era, you don't have that time anyway. So the cost-benefit analysis has shifted. You can't prepare to the point you want to anyway. So the goal is to get to week 1 as healthy as possible with your key players.
John McMullen at JF McMullen, and you mentioned some of the things that happened in the game last night. I thought Dillard looked pretty good in pass protection. You've kind of talked about him prior, as you kind of chronicled. He was struggling a little bit, getting pushed back into the backfield a bunch. I thought Goddard was just a massive target. He's just a massive man.
He's a star.
I thought Avonte Maddox, his closing speed is excellent. Cyprian, I guess, for being here for such a short time, looked like he is flying around doing some things. I mean, Hawkins had a tough night last night, so you did see some things, but I don't know how. Now let me ask you about Markin Michel, 75-yard touchdown pass. Does that open eyes and say, maybe he's got a shot, or does it even matter? Like, is he DeAndre Carter making the team last year?
Well, I mean, he has a shot, but he has a shot because he's been pretty consistently good at practice. That's a big play. It certainly doesn't hurt him. But I think if you look at that play in general, you see a cornerback making a mistake in coverage. You see a quarterback holding on to the football a little bit too long. So coaches look at things differently. They'll say, you know what, if that's first teamers in there, and it was a first team corner, but if that's a first team pass rush, you're probably going to get sacked. If it's deeper into the season, maybe the cornerback understands his coverage responsibility. There's nobody over top. He's not going to try to gamble underneath. So that's the way they look at it. But, I mean, he showed his athleticism, and, yeah, he had a 75-yard touchdown. So that's certainly a positive for him. But the bigger part of his chance and his opportunity is the fact that he's been pretty consistent at practice every day, and that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for a guy who's going to make a play every now and again because of a blown coverage. They're looking for players who do their job each and every day, and Markin has had a very good camp. His problem remains the same. We've talked about it in the past. It's a tough numbers game because the Eagles have so many receivers.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like, a guy like that, if he had 3 75-yard touchdown passes, still has an uphill battle to make the team,
right.
Based on what he does in an actual game. It still doesn't seem to hold enough weight to push him over the top. One question I will ask, though. Thorson was horrible.
Oh, you're being nice.
Does that matter?
0.0. That was his passer rate. The Blue Tarski. Yeah, he was not good. He hasn't been good really throughout camp, and that's his issue. And right now it looks bad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Like, do they now that Sudfeld's hurt, do they bring someone to not only as a camp arm, but to maybe compete with him for the third spot?
No, I don't think so, because I don't necessarily know if they were going to keep a third quarterback on the roster if Nate was healthy. I think there was a groundswell. We always talk about defaulting the draft picks, certainly in that first year. Go back a couple years to Donnell Pumphrey when he was a fourth-round pick. Well, Donnell didn't deserve to make this team. He did because he was a fourth-round pick, and they didn't want to admit a mistake. In the case of Thorson, you can get him through waivers. So if you wanted to keep him, you could get him through waivers, sign him to the practice squad, and maybe only keep Wentz and Sudfeld on the active roster, and he serves as the developmental quarterback, but on the practice squad. Now Cody's got to make the team. So you're going to carry Nate. You're not going to put him on injured reserve because that means you're out 8 weeks. So that's your 3 quarterbacks. Unless Howie goes outside the organization and trades for a younger quarterback that they like.
Right.
I don't see a veteran coming in.
John, if you have to guesstimate how many open spots are legitimately up for grabs right now on this Philadelphia Eagles team, how many would you say?
Not many. I was running down who was sort of sure things, and now you could add Cody to that list because of the injury. It's a pretty deep team, 45 to 47, I think is where I came up with. So if you're talking on a 53-man roster, you're talking about 6 spots. And as we get through the rest of the preseason, it'll become even more clear than that. But that's why there haven't been a lot of stories. You can manufacture things like Carlton Agudosi because he's so long and he's 6'6", and young players with interesting stories. Jay Liggins is from Bismarck and North Dakota, and Carson's from North Dakota. But these guys aren't making the football team.
All right, next week, of course, the Eagles get ready for Jacksonville. So Wentz against Foles, right?
Yeah, maybe. Well, it'll be the Jaguars versus the Eagles. That I can guarantee. For people in a reasonable facsimile of playing like Jay Liggins and like Carlton Aguadesi against similar players on the Jaguars.
The NFL really botched this, though. This game should be in Philly so that Foles could have been treated like, God.
Well, they make those schedules up pretty early, and they're not going to switch cities even for something like that. There'll still be plenty of hype.
Oh, yeah.
And
I'm so sad that I'm off next week so I can't get ready for the game.
Now, did you see guys arguing with me on Twitter? Multiple people. Forget about Carson Wentz. Now Nick Foles is better than Peyton Manning. Not Eli Manning. Peyton Manning.
This is unbelievable.
One of the greatest quarterbacks who ever lived. 5-time MVP. 10-time All-Pro. Nobody's won more football games. I think Tom Brady. I should take that back. I think Tom finally surpassed him. So number 2, Nick Foles is better.
Yeah. Well,
I'm on board.
All right, at JF McMullen to battle him on that one. Sports Bash Live. He, like all guests, up here via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. All right, pal. We'll talk to you next. Well, no, I'm off next week, so I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
All right. Enjoy the vacation. I'll talk to you, Ryan.
Yes, sir.